Being in tech isn't just coding. It is not just coding. It is not just maths. The tech industry is huge and there is a place for lots of different kind of skills.
Welcome to Breaking the Binary, brought to you by women and gender diverse people in tech. We're your hosts, Arden, Jarrett.
And Sarah Frazer.
And today we're really excited to get to know Sophie Benjamin. First off, though, we'd like to acknowledge you Wabakal and Worimi people, who are the traditional custodians of the land where we're recording today, and to all First Nations Australians on whose traditional lands you are listening from. Of course, thank you to our sponsors who make our meetup and podcast possible, including Newey Tech People,
Woohoo!
the Port of Newcastle,
Yay!
MGA Thermal,
Oh, yay. Sorry, I read the wrong line.
and Fraz Tech.
Love them.
Hi, Sophie. It's so great to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
So we just kind of start off on a bit of conversation about what your current hyperfixation is.
I've usually got a couple of them going at a time. So I'll give you my top three.
Oh, no.
I love it.
Number one, this has been an enduring one, is energy efficient housing.
Ooh.
So this started back when I was living in Melbourne during the lockdowns. I moved into a house with no insulation.
Yeah. That sounds really chilly.
Yeah, it was not pleasant. And I now have my own house that has no insulation.
Oh,
so
great.
I'm very into like, how can we fix this? And when I bought the house specifically to make it a fixable one, ones that there are some, the designs are not fixable. Number two is I'm teaching myself piano. I was never a piano. I used to be, well, technically am a musician, semi-retired, but I got into uni for music on guitar and voice.
Oh, amazing.
And never learnt piano because my mum thought I was going to be a prodigy when I was 4 and forced me to do it, and I hated it. But now I've got a piano in my house and I'm teaching myself, and it's like actually really nice to like not be on a screen. And then my third hyperfixation is really just like history. Again, an ongoing fixation. I love like going around Newcastle, seeing something old and weird and being like, why is that there? Why is it like that? And then finding it out. And then boring my partner and friends with like...
That's amazing. I feel like we all need you when we're walking around Newcastle.
Just like welcome content.
There are some, like here's an example. There are some houses in like Cooks Hill area that have little medallions on them. And that's from back in ye olden days where you would buy like a fire insurance. So when the fire brigade would come around, it'd probably be a horse and cart. Like this is how long ago it was.
Yeah.
And if they turn up at your house that was on fire and you didn't have a medallion on the front, they'd be like, oh, well.
Just let it burn.
Yeah,
my God.
they would. So, yeah, little things like that.
So it turns out insurance has improved slightly. Not heaps.
Only slightly. Yeah.
What are you really loving at the moment, Sarah?
Oh, God. I didn't even want to say this on a permanent record, but I'm going to anyway. I like fell down a rabbit hole and I've decided to write a book.
Yeah.
Specifically on indoor plants that are cat
I
safe.
love it.
So I spent way too much time in the last, like, on the weekend just falling, and I'm designing it in Canva so far just to get the vibe of it, and it's filled with because I have about 200 plants in my house, and they're all cat safe. So I was like, what if I put it in a book and give it to people?
Honestly,
There's
I
a
need
market.
that.
Yeah.
There is a huge market for that.
Yeah, cat plant people. And I have the knowledge because I'm a massive nerd and I've spent a lot of time reading about this. So now I'm just collecting it all into a fun little format. So if you want
love
a
this.
cat-friendly plant
We
book,
should like
let me know.
Kickstarter it. So
Yeah.
you know how many people are waiting.
And then that will give me motivation to finish it because I'm really scared that I'm like, this is a hyperfixation, and in a week I'm like, I'm never doing that again.
I feel
So we'll
that.
see how it goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm about 20 pages in. I'm aiming for at least 120 pages to
Think
make
of it as a deadline, though. You're like, I know this hyperfixation will end. How much can I cram in before I lose interest?
Eating is off the table. We're just doing the book.
Sleep,
Yeah.
no thank you.
Yeah.
Cat safe plants.
How about you?
I'm not really sure, which is a bit bizarre.
Oh.
I feel like the pink is slowly phasing out, despite me being fully dressed in pink. But I have been listening to a lot of podcasts because this is a bit later than we originally scheduled because I have been a little bit sick. And so then in that I was like, mind over matter. And then I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. And so maybe you could say my current hyperfixation is like really positive thinking.
Oh.
But also specifically A Diary of a CEO, because he has like quite a good number of like the power of the mind and
So
meditation.
many
ones on that.
people talk about that podcast being great, and I can't think of a podcast with like a mismatch of the title that I don't want to know about versus the content that people rave about.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
I feel
Diary of a CEO, a little bit of me just went,
that.
but I might
think
give it a try.
It was because a comedian that I like was on it, and I just listened to their episode. I was like, that wasn't the best episode, because now I've listened to quite a number that have been really good. And even the story, I listened to Molly Bloom's episode the other day, and about like really large poker gambling, like New York City, like, and I've watched the movie, and it's just very cool to hear it straight from her. But yeah, some really good episodes.
Yeah, all right. Well, this is a podcast now of recommending other podcasts. Wait until this episode's over, though, before you give it a try, please.
All right, Sophie, I'm going to ask you some quick questions. First of all, what are your pronouns?
She, her.
Tell me a random fact about yourself.
Random fact about myself. This is my 4th career change.
Oh,
Jeez.
wow.
That's impressive.
In how many years?
Oh, they started me working young. No, this is since I finished uni.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
You know how they say like people will go through 3 careers on average? It's actually everyone just going through 1 and you pushing the average up for everyone else.
Does this mean I can retire though? Yes.
Yeah, you get to 4 changes. That's it. You're done.
That's it.
What's something that you're proud of?
This is a little bit like, I don't know. No, I don't want to say cringe because I'm trying to say that less. Just my whole life. My life was a bit of a mess like 5 years ago, and I've really turned that ship around.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
love
rate self-satisfaction.
Yeah,
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
What do you do on days that you're not working?
What do I do on days that I'm not working? Pretty standard stuff like, trying to hang out with friends and, doing stuff around the house. But I'm also trying to like do like fun exercise more, like not just going to the gym at 5 a.m. So just trying to do like more big walks, that kind of stuff. And it's actually really nice.
More experiential exercise rather than just like stare at a treadmill. I've never been to the gym, but I'd imagine that's what it's like.
I've got a really nice gym. Shout out to Hunter Health Project in Mayfield West. But basically that and playing music as well.
Amazing.
Tell us a bit about yourself. What is your LinkedIn bio if you use LinkedIn?
So I think my LinkedIn bio says something like using words to empower the world to design, which is the Canva tagline.
Nice.
So I am a content designer at Canva working in what they call user voice. I think at most other organisations that would be sort of seen as the customer support section. But at Canva, it's really interesting because they use all the data that they get from support tickets, chatbot transcripts, people complaining on social media, people emailing the founders directly to go right back up through the product teams, and that influences the product roadmap and that also influences bug fixes. So it's not just like support is where people complain and then some people answer tickets and then nothing more is ever done with it.
Yeah.
It actually really drives what we do across Canva. So it's a really, also as a content designer, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit later, content design is a little bit unappreciated compared to product or UX design, whereas the bit of Canva I'm in is really content design led. So it's a really, really nice place to be, particularly when you think about the fact that Canva is offered in more than 100 languages to, I think, like 130 million people every month.
Wow.
So you think of that sheer amount of, that big user base, how many people are going to have a problem at any time, and then how do you make sure that whatever kind of help documentation you're giving them or help is going to be understood by them in their language. It's quite an interesting place to be doing content. So before I ended up in content design, I'll go back like in reverse. I worked in not-for-profit comms. Before that, I was a journalist in various kind of roles, ranging from like radio production, digital production, being a newsreader, lots of other sort of anything between radio and digital. And then the plan when I finished high school was to be a music producer and songwriter. So it's been this is why I've had so many careers. I've bounced around a little bit.
But it's around kind of like, not to generalize, but like that digital media kind of space in a sense.
Yeah, it's always been digital and storytelling, I think, is the main threads. And I think when people go, how did you end up in tech? I've been using tech alongside everything that I've done. Even when I finished school and went to uni, I was in the production stream, not the performance stream. So I was one of 4 women in a cohort of like 30, 35 people. All the rest were all men. But I was using tech, setting up studios, plugging things in. And then that's kind of, followed me through my whole career. When I moved to journalism, Twitter was so new that there were so few people on it that in Brisbane we would all go to the pub together. There were like 40 people on Twitter in the entirety of Brisbane when it launched.
Wow.
Yeah.
Give it a couple years and there'll be 40 people on it again.
Yeah. It's give it a couple months the way it's going. But anyway, I was maybe like 19 or 20. I thought the social media is going to be huge. And then that's sort of how I found my way into journalism, because basically of the 40 people who were on Twitter in Brisbane at the time, 10 of them were journalists.
Oh, amazing.
But yeah, tech has been the thread. It's actually been like a long journey into tech.
What does the content designer role actually entail, like say day to day?
Yeah. So it differs from like place to place and even place to place within Canva. But content design, when I try to explain it to people, I either say it's UX, like UX UI design, but with words. So instead of doing like really beautiful visual interfaces, it's the words. But it's about giving people the right content, like content that they need to know at the time they need to know it in the way that is the best to give it to them. So most people who end up in content design are former writers. I don't know a single content designer I've ever worked with who has come straight into content design. That's for a few reasons. The work has always been being done, like information architecture work, digital copywriting, but there's never been a discipline name for it. But also they don't teach it at uni.
Yeah.
They straight up don't teach it. When we see UX designers, when I've mentored and spoken to UX designers who've done a boot camp, they've been taught nothing about UX writing, bare minimum about information architecture. It's all about box on a screen, do some very light touch user research, job done.
Triangle, point.
Yeah. So my basically every day involves some form of user research. So that can be talking to users, that can be, because of my actual job, support tickets, that can be, lots of different things. It will involve some form of back and forth with engineers, a product manager and a product designer with what we're designing and what we're shipping, and very little actual writing. But I would say maybe 10% writing, 90% other stuff. And that is really important when you're dealing with a product where what you're communicating is going to be localized into lots of languages. You have to be really mindful about what it is that you're writing, what's coming out the other end, because we have a whole localization team. We don't just pop Canva into Google Translate and hope for the best. There's a whole team, and there's times where we've come up with product names and we've sent it to the localization team and they've said, oh, that's not going to sound good. Like, that's not going to work in France. It's going to mean something completely different.
Yeah.
But also content isn't just words, it's images, it's other things, and those are all localized too. So it's a lot of juggling, but my little patch that I'm working on is basically helping people to help themselves. I think everyone, when they have a problem with a piece of software, they expect to see help articles that may or may not be relevant. They expect to see a chatbot that may or may not frustrate them even more. And what we're trying to do is basically figure out how to diagnose what your actual problem is. So you might be like, I can't find this paid feature that I've paid for. Give me my feature back. And we'll be able to get information about you and go, actually, I think it's because you're logged into the completely wrong account. Yeah. Here's the account you need to log into. And that has saved us a support interaction. So it saves us time and money, but it also means the user can just get back to doing what they originally came to do.
Yeah, removing those frustrations. It's always interesting trying to help people with self-serve articles when they aren't sure of the right words to describe what's going on as well.
Well, that's a big part of what myself and the product designer I'm working with, every way that we describe, say if you've got a contact support form and we say, select your issue, basically the way that we describe those issues bears no bearing. It has nothing to do with how the user describes the issue. So users are not categorizing it right, frustrates them, frustrates us, leads to a poor experience. So it's a really interesting patch. And I in my career have always had an interest in the boring side of things. So there's so many talented people I work with who work in the product and naming new features and doing and upselling and doing all that kind of stuff. Whereas I like the challenge that no one comes to Canva to end up dealing with support. People come to Canva to make something.
Yeah.
So the fact that we're dealing with users who we've let them down in some way, how do you approach communicating with people with that mindset? How do you solve their problems? How do you kind of win them back over after they've been let down? I find that really interesting.
Amazing. What is it like in Canva as a big tech brand? One of the biggest, arguably, in Australia and extending globally.
It's a very unique place. I really feel like in some ways it's like working in the future. Like if you go into the office, you sign into the building by tapping your phone on a card reader thing on the wall. And then, there's lots of hype around, I don't know if you've heard, but Canva, they feed us breakfast. They feed us beautiful food.
I'm just like the tech company imagining like ping pong tables and bean bags. Like, do you have a ping pong table?
We have plenty of bean bags. I'm sure there is a ping pong table somewhere. What I find really interesting is there was people go, these tech companies with the free food and the ping pong and the rock climbing walls and the bean bags. The free food is real, but whenever I go into the office, no one is like messing around playing ping pong or doing whatever. People are working, they're actually really working hard in there. So there's lots of focus on the cool offices and the food and the perks and that kind of stuff. And they're great. They're really, really great. They don't force you to come into the office and they really just trust you to do what is best for you. But the level of professional, consistent, like forensic level professional development, I've never seen it before. I've never worked at a place where I don't have to argue to get money for research. I don't have to argue for a lot of things. And then, in most of my previous jobs, I feel like I've only achieved a certain portion of what I wanted to achieve because there were so many other barriers. And because of other people's mindsets and lots of other things, those barriers aren't there. So it really makes you go, oh, okay, well, now I don't have the excuse of not having the resources or good people to work with. I can actually do the thing. So, but I really think people think I know I keep bringing up the free food. It is really good.
I think there's a fair bit of like bias on the company to provide free food because if they're providing healthy food, they know that they can get like better quality and consistency of work from you.
I think the reason they did it is when they were a startup, they all used to have basically like sausages on bread that one of the founders would cook up in the co-working kitchen and they'd all sit around and eat it together.
Yeah.
And they found obviously the food was not great and eventually they were like, can you please stop cooking this disgusting food?
I love that because coming from a startup too, we've like very much gone from the everyone has lunch together just because we were small enough to do that. And it's like, how do you keep doing that as you grow?
Yeah, so that's really what they did. They hired the chef from a restaurant down the road. This was years and years ago because he was selling his restaurant and they said, do you want to come cook for us? And he did. And he's still there now and he runs the whole Vibe team. Vibe is basically, it's Vibe. It's everything from the canteen at work to how do you keep the vibe high for remote people. But yeah, so it started because it wasn't about the food, obviously, because it's nothing special. It was about getting together. So that's the reason they do it. But really everyone at Canva, no one is coasting and no one has an attitude of, oh, that's not my problem or, oh, that's above my pay grade.
Yeah.
Everyone is really invested in not ruining their own lives by taking on too much work, but trying to help everyone and trying to do the right thing by other people. And I don't think I've ever worked in such a positive environment that was genuine. It's really, really notable.
Oh, we were also talking earlier and you work remotely.
Yes.
Yeah. So how's that experience?
Love it. So this is the second company that I've worked remotely for. you could argue my previous employer, MYOB, doesn't count because 2 of those years were Melbourne lockdowns and nobody could leave. But actually what attracted me into tech at MYOB was at the time they would let you do 1 to 2 weeks, 1 to 2 days a week at home. And this was in 2019. I was like, this is amazing. And then we all had 5 days a week at term. And now the world's changed, but it's completely transformed my life. I like everything, my mental health, my physical health, everything is so much better since working from home. And I didn't realize how hard like working in an open plan office had been for me until I stopped. And then I remembered one of my first jobs out of uni, I worked remotely. I was really early in my career and I was still in radio, so my office was a soundproof windowless room. It was it was a radio studio and my boss was 1,000 kilometres away and I loved it. And for years I was like, oh, I just have to get back to that level of working environment and I've kind of managed to do it. But it doesn't, I think what gets lost in the work from home versus not is that you do have to get together, but does getting together in person have to happen 5 days a week in an open plan office? I don't think so. I've just come back from a week in Sydney where my department all got together. They flew in everyone from the Philippines and China and it was really, really good. But do you need that level of contact every single day? No.
Yeah, I find in remote work, you just have to be intentional about the times that you take together and also how you manage your teams now that you're remote. A lot of the people that are like, no, get back to the office, I suspect maybe aren't neurally diverse. So I find being in the office for a full day quite exhausting. It's like quite taxing. There's a lot on. So I prefer to pepper it out. So I come in Monday, have a chill out or work from home. Tuesday where I can do like deep work, actually focusing on some like serious stuff. And then on Wednesday I'm back in the office and I feel exhausted after those days.
I think the thing is, but you kind of touched on it there, being intentional. When I'm home, I'm working. When I'm in the office, you want to be building those social connections.
Yeah.
I will say I have had to work harder at being more social outside of work, but that's a good thing because, work had kind of drained my social battery, so I had no time for my actual life.
I absolutely find that as well. If I'm doing a work from home day, it's like, oh, I feel like I can go and hang out with someone now. But if I'm in the office all day, it's like, do I have to go and hang out with someone now?
And that helps, like, there's a big problem with people looking at changing careers or not being satisfied with their job, but their job being so ingrained as to who they are as a person because that's your only source of social connection.
That was me. I've been on a big journey over the past 4 years to unlearn that. I was raised in a very career-focused family. I poured everything into my career. And then when I had like a bout a few years ago of really poor health and my job was just like, oh, well.
Sucks to be you.
Yeah, don't get sick, I guess. And no, we can't let you work from home. I was like, okay, guess I just can't have a career again. And that's been proven completely false. So I think that flexibility, there are also, I know we're probably not down the end of this scale, but there are people who do really love being in the office and love thriving with other people, and that's totally fine.
Extroverts.
Well, the good thing about Canva is that there's enough of them that all the people who love the office go in every day and love it, and so that means the people who don't love it as much, there's not that implicit thing. But I guess with the real question is your culture just based on proximity? Like physical bodies being together, or is your culture based on something more? And culture isn't just about having beers after work. Culture is basically what is deemed important at this workplace, who is deemed to be important, and how do you communicate, how do you treat each other?
Yeah,
that's what culture actually is.
Yeah.
I'd love to know more about what you've learned in switching your career into tech, because we've noted that you've been to quite a few different careers.
What have I learned from Switch? I've learned so many things. I've learned that it's a little bit like what I was saying before. I think the quality of the work really hinges on the quality of your teams. And I've done my best work in small teams no matter where I've worked. But what I have learnt with tech is that it is really friendly to neurodivergent people. And I think we've all kind of grown up in a society where deviation from the norm is punished in basically every other career, whereas you get in tech and everyone there is at least a little bit not the norm, whether it's in the crazy big way that founders think. Founders have to think really big and really kind of differently, whether there are people who are highly technical with an incredible attention to detail. Everyone there thinks a little bit differently to what we've been conditioned to think in school and by society. So I think that going places where the way that you think is welcomed is just the easiest and the best way to live life and the best way for you to make the most of your talents and your abilities. And I've been really fortunate that tech has done that for me. I would also say in switching to tech, I never thought I would end up in tech. For years, I tried learning how to be a front-end developer twice and got bored twice. As back as 2017, I was saying to a friend, I don't know how I can do 5 days in an office if I can't work from home. Because even as a journalist, I was really lucky that I would be able to work from different locations that were quiet. And she would be like, oh, you have to, if you get into tech, if you become a developer, then you can just work from wherever. I also really wanted to move to Newcastle back in 2017 and couldn't figure out how to do it. Yeah. And she was like, this will solve both those problems. And 5 years later, I kind of did, but not in the way that I thought. Being in tech isn't just coding. It is not just coding. It is not just maths. The tech industry is huge and there is a place for lots of different kind of skills. For example, in my small team that I'm part of, which is part of a 4,000 person organisation, it's probably about close to 10 people and maybe 4 of them are engineers. Who are the rest of those people? You've got a product manager, you've got 2 designers, you've got a data analyst. There's a lot of space for people who don't have engineering skills in tech, and I don't think that is spoken enough widely. And I think for people who are in other industries like marketing, like HR, even teaching, I think is actually quite transferable, not to contribute to the teaching crisis. Don't think
Please
that just
stay in schools.
Someone needs to teach our children. There are lots of skills that aren't coding that can be transferred across, and I actually think the tech industry could do a better job at making that known.
Yeah. So you slightly touched on that, but what would you say the benefits are of going from a career change into tech, so as opposed to just going from school or uni into tech?
I think there's 2 big ones. One is that I feel really appreciative. I've worked in offices that had rats in it with horrible fluoro lights, in hideous offices, in rough areas, and almost cooking me a chef-cooked lunch.
Yeah.
I know that it is not the norm to be working with the kind of perks and the conditions that I have, and it makes me really appreciative of it. The second thing is I've brought stuff from all those other industries, not just those other jobs. So you learn just how other industries work. And when you are in tech, you're making a product that's mostly not used by other people in tech. Canva is used by all kinds of people. When I worked for MYOB, it's all kinds of small businesses.
It's so accessible.
Yeah, but you want to have that kind of idea of, okay, having worked not in tech, I've worked in other industries where tech is just a part of their day and it's an enabler. And I think having that perspective is really, really valuable.
And I saw your LinkedIn post the other day about how you'd used Canva before you actually went to Canva. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the 2 biggest things. I think perspective is so, so important.
I would say set the bar higher than rats, everyone. You can do, but it might not be cooked lunches, but it shouldn't be rats.
No, the rats were not great. But I think just having that, I don't want to say the real world because that's a bit condescending, but I think knowing that other industries operate in a different way to tech, because tech can seem very shiny and glamorous, and in a lot of ways it is, but just knowing that the thing that you're building in tech is just a part of other people's day. It's just a part of your customer's day, and you want to make it a good part.
So I feel really strongly about career switching, and I'm a big advocate for people switching careers that no longer serve them. What are your top 3 tips to help someone make a switch into tech?
So I think to make any kind of switch, particularly into tech, it's know what you want out of your life because that's going to shape it. Oh, if you actually want, I mean, that's a bit hard, but at that point, not your whole life, but what you want out of life right now.
Yeah.
Because that is going to shape kind of what job is going to make that happen. So say, for example, for me, a big part of wanting to switch into tech was I needed something with a bit more flexibility. So that kind of shaped part of my move. But I would say get real about what you want out of your life. Sounds a bit like school guidance counsellor. And think about what you find interesting and what your skills are that could go within. So say I love asking questions. That was great when I was a journalist, and it's great now working in UX. It's the same kind of impulse that's driving both those things. And my third tip, and this is actually probably the least esoteric, is think about how you could stretch your current job to incorporate more tech-related things into it. Or take a job at a non-tech company and do tech sort of stuff in it. So before I started working at MYOB, I was working at a not-for-profit, and then I was doing content design and content strategy stuff there. And then I was able to put that in my portfolio or talk about it in my interview to get me in the door at MYOB.
I did that as well at Nui Tech People, so I'm an advocate for doing tech at a non-tech driven company.
Yeah, and it also comes back to the perspective thing as well. That's probably my biggest tip.
What advice would you give your younger self?
My younger self would not have listened to any advice.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't think everything I've wanted to do, you couldn't have talked me out of it. But I would say you cannot put 100% of yourself into your career 100% of the time, because other parts of your life need that level of investment. Otherwise, your health, I think everyone's health fails them eventually as part of getting older, but you need to invest in your relationships and your health outside of work, because your work is not going to give you everything you need to have a good life.
I loved your note earlier too when you said you had some health issues and work was just like,
you
sorry.
loved that. Rude.
Oh,
I love it now.
okay, I can rephrase that.
I'm sorry.
It's really interesting that you noted that that your workplace didn't really care about your health. And it is that whole, we hear it, but it's hard to truly understand that you're replaceable, right?
Yeah.
And so you've got to look after your own interests.
I think you think about who you're replaceable to.
Yeah.
So, your work will be sad and your coworkers will be certainly sad, but your work will rehire that role or absorb it. Whereas you're not replaceable to, your friends and family.
Yeah.
And that's the real thing that I would probably say to my younger self, who would not listen.
Yeah.
I read a tip on LinkedIn and it said, when you're looking at who to work for, find people that have things outside of work in their life.
Yes.
Do not work for someone whose whole life is work, because that's what they'll expect of you as well. And it's not sustainable for a human psyche, I don't think.
That is advice I love. I would definitely not have listened to it when I was younger, because my whole life was about work, and I would be like, yeah, I want to follow in that person's footsteps.
I'm that person.
I want to be, but I did want to be that person, and I don't want to be that person anymore. And I think that is massively important advice. And it was certainly advice that no one in my life would have ever given to me.
Yeah. So following on from that, what would be your definition of success then?
God, didn't know this one was going. What would be my definition of success? All right.
Left field.
Basically for me, no, I think about this all the time.
Yeah.
It is everything in my life sustainable, and am I enjoying it?
Yeah.
So am I enjoying, with an asterisk, because not everyone loves every day at work, but are you mostly enjoying what you do? Can you keep doing what you're doing sustainably, like ongoing? Those are the two. And am I kind of treating people kindly? That's a big thing that I'm trying to get better at, because when I look back at my younger, more career-driven self, that was not something that I valued very highly, and I feel a lot of regret about it now.
I think that process of being able to reflect and saying, oh, that is who I was, like critical self-awareness, and I have recognized that, and I like allowing some like self-forgiveness, I guess, to improve on it in the future is such an important skill.
Yeah, I mean, I look back at my very highly career ambitious early to mid-20 selves and cringe like into the pavement, but I was doing the best I could at the time.
Yeah, and everyone does what they can with the resources that they have.
In the system that you're surrounded by as well. If you're surrounded by, it's been really interesting. My partner grew up in a very kind of different environment to me. I had very ambitious, very pushy parents, and she didn't. And just how that shapes your own attitudes to things.
I was going to say that it's a narrative that we're told that success is often career or position or all of these things, and then you kind of go into industry and you're like, hang on, is it?
It took me a while to learn it because I'd keep hitting these career milestones that I'd worked hard for and then not feel any better about anything.
Is there fireworks at the end?
No, but I'd be like, okay, well, that one didn't do it. I must need to do the next one. And then that didn't do it. And you're like, it'll be one of these.
Eventually I'll feel
I approached
satisfied.
it like from a weirdly opposite way. Like I just was interested in stuff. So I kept doing more things. And they were like, wow, you must be so ambitious. And I'm like, what the? No. I just like doing stuff. I don't know.
I was ambitious and also very anxious and did a lot of working to distract myself from how anxious I was, like base level.
Anxiety party every day.
And then society rewards you for that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're just vibing, like, you know, people see you as lazy.
Well, it's almost like the whole idea of marketing and selling you something is that you're not good enough as you are, that you need this next thing to like be happy or be good enough. And so to just accept where you are, it's radical.
Radical acceptance is something I've really been like trying to work on. Just like things are how they are right now, and that's okay. They might not be good, but they are how they are.
I've got the opposite brainworms where I refuse to accept when things are good now, but what about when they're not?
I think you're right.
That's
anxiety.
That's what anxiety is.
Anxiety confirmed. That's what I was telling my mum about something similar like that, about being really like put out, like basically having a meltdown that my plan changed.
Oh God, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, and my mum was very like, see, what I do is just plan for every possible scenario. I'm going, I think that's called anxiety, Mum.
Yeah.
So we're a Newcastle-based group at heart, and we love Newcastle, and we love the Newcastle tech community. Why did you pick Newcastle as a place to have and grow your career?
So I came to Newcastle about a decade ago. My cousin runs Basement on Market Street, ground
delicious.
floor as well. And neighbours as well. And
delicious times 3.
Yeah. So we came here for a family Christmas back then, and I instantly fell in love. And I came back a few times for Tina and when I was playing in bands. And I was like, I'd only just moved to Melbourne then, but I was like, I have to live here. And so I tried twice to move here, applied for jobs at a couple of local companies and did not get them. And then I just kind of put that dream on the shelf because I was like, no one's going to give me a job here. So it's never going to happen. Then I met my partner who grew up on the Central Coast, and then COVID happened, and I was like, oh, okay, I think we can actually do it. I think we can actually move to Newey. But I love the history. I love just the physical environment is really, really beautiful. And I always really loved living in regional cities before I moved to Melbourne. I grew up in like the country. I'm too soft to go back to like anywhere less than 40,000 people. But Newey's a really, really good size. And just I feel like my blood pressure has dropped. Just it's a nice place to live. So aside from like the struggle of making friends in your 30s, which I don't think is isolated to Newcastle, I think that's just life. I love it. And I was just saying to my partner the other day, I can't believe that I said we are moving to Newcastle and all our friends think we're crazy, but they're the crazy ones. And looking back 18 months on, it was absolutely a crazy move, but it was the right one.
Yeah.
That's so good to hear.
Love it.
All right.
How do you feel about the beach, just quickly?
I'm warming up to the beach.
She doesn't like the beach.
No,
That's all
but
right.
see, you got to understand. I grew up 300 kilometers inland in a drought. So the beach, it's not my natural habitat. I'm also really short-sighted. And I'm bad at swimming. But
a few issues there.
It's not a natural fit, but I like it now.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, I loved this episode, but if you, the listener, also enjoyed this episode, please leave us a good review, recommend it to your friends and share it online. Linked in the description will be our meetup group, LinkedIn page and Instagram. Give us a follow to support our community and stay up to date. Sarah, what do you have to say to end the podcast today?
If you want to place your pre-order for cat-friendly indoor plants, you can find me at www.imjustkidding.com. Thank you and goodbye. Arden makes me do the outros every time, and they're always bad.
They're always different. It's just like
Perfect.
How do you both feel about the beach?
We hate it. It's like a recurring joke that no one likes the beach.
Laura?